Like, are you really ready?
I'm really ready.
Really ready.
I've never more ready. Sound check. Testing. Looking good.
Looking or sounding?
Sounding
These are two
good.
varying
Yeah.
answers.
Sounding
Both of them
good.
are bad. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no.
They can hear that I hear from most other people. It's hear me. So,
The only complaints are they can't on this program.
Can't hear enough. Yeah, something like
that. Just as much as the Mason.
We will go ahead. I just want to make sure we're moving along here. We've had an internet that everything is moving correctly. It does seem awful. Now we are moving again. Hold on.
Oh, hey, there we are.
Are we there?
We are on.
Okay.
I see us. We no longer look like a pixel art, so that's an improvement.
Okay, here we go. I can hear myself now.
Excellent. Hi, everybody.
There we go.
So sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are glad to be here with you today. It is noon. It is Thursday, which means
it's caucus time.
It is every week. Before we get started, make sure to go on over to phyllisschlafly.com, type your email into the email list, and you'll get a big old goodie bags of lots and lots of interesting links this week over plenty of topics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. We got a good one coming to you, which is why it is the CIA coming after our stream today, because they know we are going to be dropping some truth bombs.
You know, that's actually probably not uncalled for, because we all of a sudden literally hit the button to go. Everyone came in, and then when I turned on the camera, wham, there goes, like, the Wi-Fi signal dropped, and it cut my hardwire signal and everything else. That was weird, and it's never happened to me before in that manner. So you're welcome that we're still here, because we worked through it, but it's definitely something interesting that's posing us. So
the globalist space laser just hit us right as we started, interrupted our Wi-Fi connection, but we fight and we are still here.
We fight and we are still here. Apologize if you stuck with us through that, but thank you for it. And we've got a good one today. Like he said, go to phyllisschlafly.com and sign up because there's a lot to talk about. And this was one of those we knew inevitably there was nothing to talk about besides what everyone else is talking about today. Hopefully differently than they're talking about it, though, because there was a debate last night. Granted, it might not have been anything to do with the person who's going to win.
Right.
But there was a debate last night, and the Iowa caucuses are on the 15th, right around the corner here. 4 more days.
Yep.
And the Iowa caucus for the GOP kicks off. Takes place. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Last night, neither one of us watched any of the events live.
Right.
We've covered them after the fact, but there were 3. There was a debate going on in Des Moines between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Oh, by the way, the biggest news, Chris Christie dropped out. I know this breaks your heart as much as it breaks ours. It's a punch. but we'll somehow move on. No, I think what we all knew and expected, Chris Christie dropped out. He said he finally didn't see a path forward. I don't know when that became apparent, but it's seemed apparent for quite a while now.
I thought he would have figured that out 8 years ago.
You never know.
But he's dropped out, and he will now be a full-time donut taste tester. My sources tell me. So
let's leave that to the Babylon Bee. They're better at it. So Chris Christie's out of the race. Last night, he wasn't going to be on the debate stage. Trump was invited, but he, of course, didn't show up, nor should he, in my opinion, for any of these things. But Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley faced off. At the same time, Vivek Ramaswamy was holding a live event in Iowa as well, and that was streaming as well. And at the same time, Donald Trump was on Fox News talking with, who were the hosts, Brett Baer and who else? Was it, I honestly forget.
The other one, yeah.
All of everything I've been watching, Trump just sucked the oxygen out of the room. It kind of appeared last night at his event. Was very personable and down to earth. This is one of the better ones I've seen. He was just good. He was on. But that was going on Fox News as well at the same time. So we had the trifecta of Townhalls happening last night. And there was a lot too much to do. So we just chose to read a book and then catch up on it after the fact.
Yeah, it was a good one. The Trump Town Hall was a good one. Now that I've gone through and watched it, it is definitely would have been worthwhile to see it live. Aside from the fact that getting to watch it after the fact, you get to skip the commercials.
Right, it's worthwhile watching.
Yeah, you should go back and watch it.
That's the top lines. I think we should dive into what kind of maybe some of the things that happen, some of the dynamics of it, and what it means moving forward. But I would tend to say for me, the Haley DeSantis debate was pretty irrelevant. I didn't see a single bit, and I've watched most of it now at this point. I didn't see a single bit of relevant content in it, except for a couple things that I'd like to get into that we'll talk about. The Vivek thing is very interesting, and that's a dynamic that I do want to explore further. I think that he is, well, that was really interesting last night, and he's been talking a lot more about January 6th and a few other things that I think are incredibly important. So that was maybe worth a listen and a look. He has become more and more worth a look for me as we've gone along through this process than at the beginning. And then, of course, the Trump Town Hall, I actually think is incredibly valuable to go and look at because, again, likely that this is the primary winner and also likely one of the, the potentials for the next president of the United States. Absent fraud, he will be. This is what I keep telling people. Absent fraud, he wins. That's a big but, though. A big
even with fraud, I mean, there are constraints even to fraud.
Yeah, we'll see. We could talk about that. Yeah. And then I think that was worth it, though, because out of a lot of Trump has inarguably gotten better at speaking, at taking questions. Sometimes he's pretty freewheeling, but man, when he gets into the zone and just goes and does really well, he is very interesting to listen to because it comes out, some of the, the braggadociousness disappears. It gets really interesting to hear and see him because he's very thoughtful. He's very direct. He can be very just low key and talk about things very matter of factly, but he's very knowledgeable. He's well read. He's well learned. He remembers things. He's got some interesting dynamics. He's obviously not just as much as he makes extreme comments about people, he also comes back, we'll figure it out. We'll bury the hatchet. Like he kind of moves. It's a very New Yorkie, which is what threw everyone off, I think. New Yorkish, New Yorkie. I didn't mean to, I don't like Yorkie dogs. No offense, everyone, if you have one, but you should not. But it's very New Yorker style. And I think that was one of the things that off-put everyone to begin with. Honestly, it's Chris Christie's problem the whole way through, which is, I think, why they seemingly seem to get along so well, even after they hate each other. That was worth it, though, because it was one of the very, very good ones that I've seen from him, and it's very informative. So anyway, there's a lot to unpack, not in really everything that was said last night, but in what it means moving forward, I think. And that's what I want to talk about. And then we're going to come back. We did, you saw us tease it. We always like to tease those things in there as we do our captions and titling and everything. There were 3 town halls, but there's also a rat's nest because one of our viewers right before we signed off last week said, what about the Epstein files? What's going on with that? So we've got a little bit of an update that we want to talk about, but we'll bring that here in a little bit. So
it will happen. Stay tuned.
It will happen. Stay tuned. We're only 11 minutes in, and that's even with technical difficulties. So we're just getting started, people. And don't forget, come and chime in on the chats, on the comments. If you're on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, wherever you are, we are watching. Rumble is already coming alive. Mason's source were about
it was
Martha McCallum. That's right. It was Martha McCallum. Bear and Martha McCallum. Yeah. What are your sources? You work for the Bee on the side?
No, it was revealed to me in a dream.
It was revealed to you in a dream. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
QAnon himself came to me.
QAnon himself
on the astral plane, and he was like, "This is what's going on." No.
Oh boy.
Well, I
So
do think
anyway, hit me. What's
there's a
up?
couple highlights from the Trump debate that I think are good to bring up. I mean, I'm thinking of two specifically. He handled the pro-life issue well, I
Mm-hmm.
think, because there was a pro-lifer lady, which we're extremely pro-life. That's one of my top issues, if
Mm-hmm.
not my top issue, and that was something that we worked very hard on last year as Roe v. Wade was toppled over. But this lady comes up and is asking, are you still pro-life? Like, because you talk about how some of these campaigns have suffered because of too intensive pro-life messaging, and Trump did a very good job of bringing it back up to the very top level of. You couldn't even be asking this question right now where pro-life is like a issue we can even fight over if it weren't for me, because it's because of Trump that we had the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. He is in action the single most pro-life president since Roe v. Wade was decided. And there's no question about it. It's at the point where there even can be laws made to restrict abortion, and that fight even can be had. So I think he did a really good job of kind of highlighting that top level thing, and then and qualifying probably more than he should have, or more than I would like to hear just based on my convictions, but probably to a
Mm-hmm.
degree that's wise on the political battleground, of saying this. It's hard for this to be the number one issue. Sometimes people do lose campaigns over that. But what's important now is that there are babies that have been born that would not have been if it weren't for Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, this is interesting because when it comes to Trump and pro-life, it's been a little back and forth the last few months. He's made some comments that have kind of gone along with the more establishment line. Oh, we just all need to move on and get over it. This is a losing issue, blah, blah, blah. I come back. But inarguably, the pro-life issue is, in fact, one of the things, or the pro-life, the issue of abortion is one of the things that the left is advancing the most. This is one of their keys. I would say the key part of their platforms for 2024. So that begs the question, do you think, I'm curious, do you think that the left actually thinks this is a winning issue now because they have just entrenched abortion so far into the culture of women's empowerment and all the other, we've talked about this with the, with Carrie Gress's book, The End of Woman, but like, do they really think this is a winning issue, or are they still trying to, is this to them some sort of hope or distraction technique? I'm kind of curious because it's inarguably it's one of the major tenets of their platform moving forward. Candidates across the board.
Yeah.
So if they're going to make it an issue, does that mean they've already won, or they're trying to win? And if they've already won, is that why people are saying, well, maybe we should back off of this and it's not the winning tactic? Because Trump kind of made some comments about that. Well, we almost like we need to move past it.
Right.
I know that upset a lot of pro-lifers, but obviously I agree with you. I think it's, again, inarguable.
Right, but like you were saying, like you need to win elections,
Right.
Like I've done more for this and I need to win elections, and that's what should be considered. Yeah, but I think that in a lot of ways it's an issue that the left has won on. And it's going to be, because even in Ohio now, it's the abortion re-legalized even after, and even in their state constitution after Roe v. Wade was overturned, when the fight actually came back, and it was unfortunately kind of easy for them to do that, and I fear that that's what we'll see a lot as these fights go forward, because they've been so good at the propaganda and the cultural entrenchment of women's right to choose, blah blah blah, my body, my choice, these easy taglines that in kind of the zeitgeist that we live in now, where feminism has won essentially. People will be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense because we now live in the world of a feminist outlook. So yeah, sounds good. Especially women voters, and women voters are very important for any election, without a doubt. So it's a tough thing for sure. But I think that we should focus our efforts on the states where it is currently illegal, keep it that way, fight hard, because it's a lot harder to repeal laws that are already on the books than it is to add new laws banning abortion.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. That's a whole conversation to be had in and of itself. But
yeah,
it's one that's very
we
interesting.
shouldn't get too lost in the weeds. The other big Trump thing that I thought was great from last night was when he brought back up the dictator only on day one thing. And he really clarified what he meant there, because we all saw the headlines like Trump's going to be the dictator on day one, and cool, epic. I'm excited to see that.
Mhm.
But he clarified that his plan is to go to the fullest extent of his executive power to restore U.S. energy independence and deal with illegal immigration on day one, because he thinks those are extremely pressing issues. And they're projects that he worked on a lot over his last 4 years that were hamstrung. Well, at least the energy independence was hamstrung by COVID.
Right.
Migration the other way around, but that's for different reasons. But and he talked about how we are going to see the greatest deportation campaign that we have ever seen in this country, which is, I mean, that's what's needed. And it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pretty. People are going to be like, oh, this looks like a human rights violation. I mean, it would be much worse to watch America crumble as we just let millions upon millions of criminals and terrorists that we don't know who they are into our country and just release them into the wild. So certainly the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a good, it was a good conversation all around. It was very worthwhile to look at and listen to. And actually, I got to say, one of the interesting things, and I know this has because one of the very interesting topics that continues to get discussed is the whole Trump VP pick. Because not that the vice presidential position on the ticket is necessarily the deal breaker or maker, although that often has, I think, contributed. I mean, you see Obama picking Biden, Trump picking Pence. There really is an electoral difference, I think, that can be made out of some of these things. But what's very interesting to me is there are some very different directions to go. And I would call it kind of like we talk about polls. I think poll numbers are largely phony, but or I should say not credible. However, trends are something you can pick out of polls. When every poll is doing everything and it's always, the numbers are getting farther apart. Well, I might not trust your numbers, but that trend line is probably fairly accurate.
Right.
I think that his philosophy for picking a VP, which will be revealed in who it is, because there's so many different diametrically different, opposed people on this potential list. People talk about Haley. Nikki Haley could be a very interesting and sacrificial choice because she would pull in this and that. I honestly don't think that would be enough to shake some of the never Trumpers. At this point, they're entrenched as they are. They would probably just turn to hating her because it doesn't make sense. None of the rabidly anti-Trump stuff that I see tends to make sense. It doesn't have a logical basis. It has an emotional basis. So I don't think that would do anything. But then to pick someone else who's a stronger person in his kind of, camp could really make a huge push forward, because I don't think an argument over this is the general election itself. And I'll put this down. I'll postulate this. Postulate? Yeah, that's the right word. I just had a moment of self-doubt that threw me for a tailspin.
No, you're great.
Thank you. I postulate that the general election is not so much a fight over convincing this group of people to pick between these two and which way they will go. I think that the general election will be won or lost, again, absent fraud or in spite of fraud, whatever you want to say, will be picked with who gets more of their people to show up. I mean, it's been that way, I think, for a while, but definitely this case, there's really no undecideds left. I think the only undecideds are if they're going to bother to go and vote for the person that they think they're going to vote for at this point. I don't think there's any changing.
Right.
They're all locked in. And that especially is true when it comes to the binary choice between Trump and Biden. And we'll even throw in RFK Jr. there. That's not binary anymore, but the choice between these three, a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent.
But nobody's really thinking about RFK Jr.
Not really, but I mean, there's still some poll numbers that are going that direction. But I mean, I don't think that anyone. That's the thing. People who think that they're going to vote for a Ron DeSantis or a Nikki Haley at this point, that's not really at issue. I think the curious thing is, so when that doesn't happen, or if it doesn't happen, whatever makes you feel better to hear, who are you going to vote for? Well, if they're not going to show up and vote for Trump, then that's kind of the key that we're looking at. It's the indicator. Right. They weren't picking, they were deciding whether or not to show up and vote for one of these people. And then how many of your people can you get out? So I think that Trump makes a very interesting VP choice. If he were to pick a Tucker or a Vivek, that could just embolden, like the 2016, 2020 crowd comes out even bigger than before because they feel emboldened by this. The Haley crowd isn't going to bring out the America First people, but it might bring out some of the establishment, but I really don't think so. I think that they hate Trump enough. It doesn't matter who he picks. So I think that he knows that. I don't think that his team is going to pick a Nikki Haley. I think that he's going to pick someone who makes him stronger with his own base, because I really do think it's just simply whose base is going to be more of a performer in 2024 in November. It's not going to be, well, in this year, it's this year now.
Yeah.
It's not going to be about winning over people who you haven't won over in the middle. I think that those days are dead.
Right.
Dead and gone.
And a lot of those people are won over.
Right. And there are people who change their mind still, but if they change their mind about an issue, it's still like it's not the same as it was. That's what I mean by that. So that's going to be very interesting. And I know that he even floated at Fox that he's already picked it out, which that may be true or it may not. I get the sense that it was true. And based on what he said and how he said it, I'm pretty sure I know who he's thinking or who he at least meant at that moment, if that's in fact true.
Who do you think?
Tucker.
Yeah.
I think Tucker. It's just my guess. And actually I heard Benny Johnson say something similar, but like the way that he has said it and the way that he said it to the Fox News hosts, who, by the way, Phyllis is over here. She's absolutely correct. I saw she said over in Rumble, I could see the disdain that Brett Baer and Martha McCallum could barely disguise for Donald Trump, which
it was
true.
So funny. And he kept like making fun of them and Fox News up there.
He did.
It was like, that question was clearly
which is why those things all combined. Here's my prediction. Those things all combined. And then like the little smirk of, we'll do another show about it. Like the way that he said everything, to me, that tells me at that moment, he's thinking about Tucker.
That'd be hilarious.
VP, which would be really funny because they really do. Like they hate Fox. A lot of Fox hates Tucker and they're not allowed to talk about Tucker. Like there's some bad stuff there. Tucker, though, I think is a very interesting choice for being a non-political person because as much as Tucker supported, like he's been pretty honest about, I support pretty much all of Trump's policies, but I didn't really care for him. But the raid at Mar-a-Lago, that sealed the deal. I'm a Trump supporter. I am voting for Trump since that moment because this cannot be allowed to happen in the country. When a sitting president uses the Justice Department to try to knock out the front runner on the other side of the aisle, the next potential matchup. No way. That's not okay. It doesn't matter who it is. That's not okay. But now I like him even more. I'm going to vote for him. And if they arrest him and throw him in jail, by goodness, I'm going to give him the max donation for everything. I think he said something like that. Yeah. And I think that's the correct thing here. And I really hate when I see Trump's personality get in the way of that opinion for people, because to me, that's the issue. The issue. We can't allow this to happen. This is not how the justice system works. This is not how the Constitution works. This is the issue. So when I hear someone like a Tucker say that, it's not just you like Trump because you like Trump. You're being very honest about this. This is not okay. This is a very independent-minded way to arrive at the same conclusion that I have. Not that I don't feel the same way, just that like this isn't a personality thing for you. I think that makes Tucker a very interesting choice because everywhere I see, like sometimes when he talks about stuff on the show, really, we're talking about this is kind of out there. Other times he's talking about stuff I think that needs to be talked about. He's independent and open-minded, and that is kind of the antithesis of the construct that we fight against with the deep state or the establishment, whatever name you want to subscribe to. That's the antithesis of them because it's this very transparent search for truth. I'll say anything and entertain anything. And over here we have all these, no, don't look here, closed door this, closed door that, seal these records, never allow that. It's all secrecy. And with Tucker, there's just no secrecy. He says what he's thinking.
And he's just like finding these, he's digging up random people that I'm like, where did you even find this guy that's like a credible source in this? I mean, he interviewed Epstein's brother too. Right, yeah. Which we'll get into the Epstein stuff more later. That,
to me, it's very interesting. It's very interesting to me when something like that gets floated, because that is a very interesting choice in the realm of everything that's going on here. That's kind of crazy to think that might actually happen. These two media personalities.
Yeah. It would be awesome. There you go. And it would be good to have a vice president, at least a vice presidential pick, who is as charismatic as Tucker, and as able to, draw people in and grab attention as he is. So
yeah, absolutely. But that was interesting. There were some things I want to go down, and I see some folks here in the chat. So I should have. I'll hop over to that in just a second. I see some stuff going down, but this is very interesting because there was a lot of talk. This is one thing I do want to talk about briefly. I think that a lot of us for a while have kind of had more of a. I like Ron DeSantis. I wish he wouldn't run this time though, because he should run later. Ron DeSantis has done a good job, this and that and the other. But the last week has been interesting because he's made a few comments, especially surrounding January 6th and J6 prisoners and this and that just, I think it's given a lot of pause to some of us who were kind of like, yeah, I like Ron DeSantis, just not this time. Whereas I have a very negative opinion of Nikki Haley on all of these issues and policies where I just diametrically disagree with her and think it's no, I'm opposed to these things. With DeSantis, it's not so much that as a timing thing.
Right.
Well, the last week he had some interesting stuff that he said
Mhm.
about, J6 people, and he gave a lot of canned answers and
Mhm.
didn't really address the question. He had a few other things, and it essentially kind of sounded like, and then at the debate last night, he said something similar. This can't be, we can't talk about relitigating 2020 and, Trump, and this is what blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
This has to be a referendum on Joe Biden and his failed policies. And I look at it and say, but Joe Biden's failures started with a rigged election,
Mhm.
with election interference, and everything they're doing to Trump. We can't just move past it, because the whole
Mhm.
point of the litigation about Trump, it's not a what would you call it, incidental or a part of
Mhm.
this election race. It's the whole point. The whole point of the litigation against him is to interfere in
Right.
his running in 2024. You
Right.
can't just say we should move past it and talk about Joe Biden. Move past what? The whole point. The
Right.
next thing in election interference is what they're doing to Trump. So as an opponent to Trump in the primary,
Mhm.
credible or not, you can't just say we move past it. This has kind of made me look at it and go, is Ron DeSantis as awesome and conservative as we
Mhm.
once like? Because as governor of Florida, he's been doing a fantastic job. But
Mhm.
are you listening to bad advisors, or do you actually have some of these more kind of establishment-y opinions?
Mhm.
Like what do you think? Has any of that struck you, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I think that his campaign is just being run really bad, and it's just every time I see Ron DeSantis, it just gets more strange and awkward and kind of uncanny. Like, what are you doing? What is going on here? What are you thinking? Um, and yeah, I because I actually can't understand what he's thinking. I can't even. I think he's just like praying for this Iowa caucus to be over with so he can drop out of the race and move on from the 2024 election. I mean, that's my best guess of where he is right now, and is just kind of trying to do damage control. But he probably has bad advisors for that too, because as Nikki Haley said at the town hall last night, a line that she stole from Hillary. His campaign, DeSantis's campaign, is imploding, which it probably is. And something I noticed very well. First of all, at their town hall last night, it was just so weird. It was just like back and forth, like you're a liar, no, you're a liar, no, you're a liar, blah 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 blah. Like you're misrepresenting this, you're misrepresenting that. It's like, okay, why are you even up here? You are both non-entities in this race. You're not, neither of you are going to be president, and we're not going to let you be president. Nobody's going to vote for you. You have 10% of the vote, like each of you. Nobody cares. Shut up and go home. But then I look at Ron DeSantis's campaign website, and I thought it was very strange, because he's got his like "Why Nikki Haley is Bad" video, which is weird that you're like targeting the third place person or second place person, oscillating back and forth.
Yeah.
Like they have no valid criticisms of Trump anymore, because he's so obviously going to be the nominee, and they need to get behind him because he's going to win the Republican nomination, and this is an important election that we need everybody we can get. But on DeSantis's website, like his like roasting Nikki Haley video, she's right. It is very like weirdly cut and like in a dishonest way. It's a bunch of like 1.5-second clips of quotes that are just like obviously taken out of context. And I'm not saying this to defend Nikki Haley, but it's just like so bizarre why that is what's at the top of his website, which is what leads me to think that he doesn't have the right people running his campaign. They don't know what they're doing. They don't really have a goal. They're going after the wrong targets in a unfair and dishonest way. Which, like, I mean, you look at Nikki Haley's DeSantisLies.com. I mean, just like comparatively much better put together website that it just lists out the evidence, and it's like, okay, you can go look at this. Which, still not defending Nikki Haley. I don't like her. But yeah, I don't think DeSantis knows what he's doing at all.
Well, and both of these things just kind of strike me. I see all these different things, and it's like, man, this just seems like, election campaigning as usual, like the same, usual suspects with the usual lines and the usual donation emails and the usual bit. And I'm like, why are you listening to this? Like, we've moved past this.
Right.
And I really think that is where, and this is the crux of a lot of my discussions with people about Trump or not Trump, which is what it boils down to, Trump or not Trump, in 2024. Some people saying, we just need to move past it. And other people saying, we can't. Do you not understand? You can tell which side I'm on. We can't. Right. Can you not understand why we can't? Because it's not about going back to the way it was. The way it was sucked. It was like the Matrix. We really were stuck in this world of like, You go back over the last 25 years from the Bushes and the Romneys and this and that, like we're kind of talking about all this stuff with politics as usual and foreign policy, America's place in the world, some trade policy, some immigration, some this, some that. And I'm like, there's no some of these things anymore. Like the border is open. We are being infiltrated by hundreds of thousands, millions of people a year. That's not even including the discussion about mass legal migration and H-1B visas and all kinds of stuff. And then you talk about all the, like when you go down each of these issues, some people seem to not see them as that big of a deal. And these aren't cataclysmic issues, so we don't have to just jerk the American political system out of sync to do something about it. And a lot of the rest of us see it as major cataclysmic issues that end the nation soon, not just the next election's the important. People always say that.
Right.
No, I really don't think that we have that many free and fair elections left, if we even have already potentially had our last one.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And I see it as that bad. So the primary battle becomes powerful people behind the curtain, elites, whoever they are, wherever they are, whether they're the bug-eating people in the WEF or it's lifetime bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci, who are useful idiots. They're not actually in charge of the globalist agenda, but they think they're a big part of it.
Right.
They probably aren't. Any of those folks, this is the primary enemy. It's not Russia. It's not even China. The primary enemy to the American way of life is the domestic threat of a permanent, lasting government. This huge thing, the behemoth of the administrative state we've got. If that's the primary fight, then what I need is not someone to give me lines as usual and say, well, we just need to move past this. There is no moving anywhere until we deal with this.
Right.
Because otherwise, everything else that you say to me is just like everything else that's been said the last 20 years, which is we'll address immigration, we'll address pro-life, and then we never get there. Or we get all these little compromises. No, we're compromising with each other, but it's just like two hands of the same, different parties, but two hands of the same thing shaking. No, I'm ready for someone to take a sledgehammer to the system, crack it wide open. And if that's the loudmouth orange man, fine, bring it on.
Yeah.
And the loudmouth orange guy and the dude in loafers who hunts ducks in his khakis and loafers, like I will take them because they have nothing to lose.
Right.
They don't need your system to get rich, which is a very big point. It's a very interesting divide because this just, to me, looking at the field, it has to be Trump because this has to be litigated. It's not done yet, and we can't just move past it because this is the whole point. And it's very interesting to have that conversation because a lot of other people don't see it that way, and it just results in this. You can bring it back, but I'm kind of always floored when I see people who don't see that as being the thing that's happening right now and the primary fight America has to deal with. Right. I'm done. Sorry, soapbox.
Yeah. What does the GOP do without Trump? It's done nothing. I mean, for the last 20 years, it's the same old, and meanwhile, all the problems have gotten worse, and their bureaucracy has grown, and that's all you need to think about. It's like, is Nikki Haley really going to get in there and tear up the bureaucracy? Really, you think she's going to get in there? No, she is the bureaucracy. That's been her job for a long time. So yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
You think Nikki Haley is going to get in there and be America first? She invited so much Chinese money into her state when she was governor. Like, not serious political actors. Yeah. Well, do you want to hop over to the
sure?
The Epstein stuff?
I'm trying to think and see. Oh, that's the only two things I was going to bring up. And I got a little video, but we don't have to play it. It was kind of funny. CNN. There was one of their guys running a little 10-person panel, mostly undecided. Like 2 people knew who they were going to caucus for Monday. Most of them didn't. After the debate, and they watched Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis talk, this guy comes back, okay, so all of you, 10 of you that were mostly undecided, 2 kind of thought, where are we now? There were 2 for Ron DeSantis, 3 raised their hands they were going to caucus for Nikki Haley, 4 raised their hands they were going to caucus for Trump, and then a few other people just still didn't know. So it was like, and Trump won.
Yeah.
From the thing he wasn't at. They were asking about, and it was really funny to watch the CNN guy, obviously pained by that. But this, I was just going to point out, it's been very interesting to me to see after every single debate, I think except for the very first one back in August, after every single Republican debate, Donald Trump has gone up by 1 to 2 points in the polls. Like the GOP primary poll as a whole, he's gone up every single time. And I'm kind of curious to see if he goes up after last night, another debate he wasn't in, with the exception that I guess what we're just going to see is what happens on Monday.
Right.
That's the next poll is Monday. But I found it very interesting. I looked at, debate polls, and then there's polls before, polls after. Every single time everyone else debates, Trump goes up. And to me, CNN, 10 undecided voters are listening to these two, and then more of them raise their hands for Trump, who wasn't even one of the two they were listening to. The more that you listen to people on this other side of just saying the same things that we've kind of always heard, and we just need to move past this, the more people go, yeah, never mind Trump, because we need to deal with this. We need to deal with this that you all won't admit as an issue. And I had so many more links, but those are all almost on their own individual caucus standalone episodes we could do. So we can move on. It's been a while. We're a few minutes in now, only a few.
Yep.
And all I can think of, by the way, is with the real Ed Martin, please stand up. There's someone over here on YouTube who goes by Ed Martin Jr., who's asking if we do call-ins, which we don't, but it makes me wonder if we should. And I don't know who this is, but it's not Ed Martin, our boss, who you listen to on the Pro America Report frequently. So will the real Ed Martin please stand up? I guess that's all I have to say there. Anyway, there you go. That one's perplexing. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So you feel free to comment though, and do chime in. And I see a lot of stuff going on over here. By the way, keep seeing people refer to, I didn't know that RDS was is RDS a real acronym for Ron DeSantis?
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Ron DeSanctimonious. Yeah. Is this what because I see RDS, so. And since I'm a gun owner, I go to Red Dot site, because that's what I'm used to seeing. I'm like, what a Red Dot? Oh, Ron DeSantis. Yeah. I get it now. I'm tracking with you people. Over here on Rumble, y'all are into the political acronyms. They know what they're talking about. Okay. Before we close everything out, let's move on to the wretched scum of hive and villainy. Report at Mos Eisley. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein's files.
Epstein.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
The Jeffrey Epstein files. What are your key takeaways from the Jeffrey Epstein files released the last couple of weeks? Week. Yeah, they just got dropped last week.
The key takeaways are that we're probably never going to get the full story, because it kind of seemed when the judge was like, it's 170 names. It was like 10,000 pages of interviews with witnesses, and some of the names included are like of the witnesses, some of whom are victims, or like people who worked at the court. That's included in the files as names. So it wasn't the boon we were hoping for of like 170 Jeffrey Epstein connected people that definitely did bad things with Jeffrey Epstein, and here's the evidence. It's more so interviews with witnesses and these young women who experienced abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates, and interviews with them. And within those interviews, some people are identified and saying like, yeah, this person definitely did bad things. I don't want to go into specifics because we're on YouTube and it's just not fun to talk about. But among those people were there weren't a ton of new ones. There was also a lot of fake ones because the style of the documents was so easy to mimic that there were fake ones, some of which were just like memes and funny, like Stephen Hawking, wanting to undress midgets, like just a joke. He wasn't actually in the files. But there were some, Bill Clinton, the usual suspects. There were a couple others. David Copperfield, the magician, which was like, oh, okay. The witnesses when asked about both Michael Jackson and Donald Trump, they were like, oh no, I don't think that they did anything. They didn't do anything directly to me. I never witnessed them do anything directly to anybody else. But yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of new stuff that we know because the real evidence, the real smoking gun is the blackmail tapes that Jeffrey Epstein had, and that the FBI, when they raided his place, they took them all, and they have probably been destroyed by now. So it's over, probably.
Well, and see, that's the thing. Is it over or is it just beginning? Because, this is what I'll say. Yeah, they've released some names, and there's been a lot of memes, but the release of names is to me, it indicates a huge drop of obligatory information. Well, we're going to give them something. We got to give them something to throw to like placate them and make them happy and throw them off the scent.
Right.
So let's give them a bunch of stuff that really everyone already knows.
Right. Which is why Cernovich said this is the cover-up.
Yeah, like 15 years ago, yes, I wanted official documentation that Bill
Mhm.
Clinton was in fact a buddy of Jeffrey Epstein's. But guess what? At this point, that's just kind of known.
Right.
This isn't revelatory. So when you come on and say, well, don't worry, we're going to release the Epstein files, Bill Clinton. You're like, thanks. I kind of know that at this point. Who do I not know about?
Right.
That's what I want, and that's what you're not going to give up. And that's what I think the key takeaway from this has been is, and I hope that I think it was Autumn last week who like the last comment in on Rumble or YouTube, I forget which one, was, hey, you want to talk about the Epstein files? I hope you're watching this week because this is my clear takeaway. It's kind of the same as you. I don't care about all these names. You're giving me obligatory things that at this point I already know. What is starting to come up, the revelations that we're getting are much more the connection between Jeffrey Epstein and the world of American intelligence, worldwide intelligence. And that's kind of interesting because it switches the whole, there have always, well, I'll say it this way. There have always been questions about, you mean this financier, hedge fund? What does this mean? Where's Jeffrey Epstein get all this money from? Like, we know he's a pervert and he runs all this other stuff. So with or without details or indictments, this is just kind of now a known fact. He was a scumbag and he participated in trafficking people around the world with other scumbags, for other scumbags. But why? How did he get all this money? Where did it come from? Well, when you start to see the connections and it very much, the information that has started rolling out, not just the last week, but right before the week, which is why I think that this name dump is really a distraction attempt, not actually a giving of information, because so many of the things that are coming out, the intelligence community has covered for him at a level where now we're left for the question of, was he your bag man? Like, which by the way, for non-mob movie lovers, this is like the racketeering version of your banker who keeps your money. Like, are we literally, is he actually just a dude with a lot of money who had weird perversions and knew all the other people? So intelligence kind of sneaks their way in and asks for stuff in exchange for more money. Or did they literally finance and just set him up and become, I don't know, that you could go either of those two directions and ask questions. But the reality comes down to Jeffrey Epstein has a major blackmail book of all kinds of powerful people, and every intelligence agency in the world wants in on that, and apparently was cashing in on that for all we can tell.
Because when you look like tapes, videos,
exactly. I say a blackmail book. I'm being colloquial, like blackmail information, because then when you start looking into it, it's like, oh yeah, he gets suddenly when he is finally arrested for the very first time, it's kind of quiet. They don't do a perp walk, and then the way that the Southern District of New York charged him, they charged him with less than they could have, and it ended up binding their hands so they couldn't run down to, was it a property in New Mexico or Arizona? I think it was New Mexico, right?
Yeah.
One of the houses, and get a safe, and all of a sudden the safe disappears in the 2 weeks between when they arrested him and when they get down there. Well, that's just enough time for someone to get in and get rid of stuff. But you could have charged him for these things, and these would have been even a low bar, and that would have given you the ability to go. It's almost like when we finally moved on him, we did so in such a way that everyone had 2 weeks of butt covering time to make sure we could, go clean up some evidence, because we got to give him up at this point. He's too hot to keep a hold of. Man, I'm going into a lot of mob language here. It's so hot, man. Our bag. Anyway, that was not my real attempt at a New York accent, by the way, or a monster accent. It starts to give all of these appearances of that. So you're left to question again, like, is our world intelligence agencies using him, or did they actually create him? I don't know. I almost don't know if it matters at this point. Well,
because he was certainly connected. He was certainly,
he was connected, like State Department paid properties that he lives in, and all kinds of stuff that's coming out. It's like, I don't care who's on the list. That's, well, I do, but the names I don't know. I don't care that Bill Clinton's on the list. That's interesting. Why are U.S. taxpayer dollars funding this guy? And I mean, this of course just comes into the whole questions about the CIA. By the way, it's been really nice we're talking about the CIA now, so we're both, at risk. But no, like, this just brings in the whole question of like, well, there have been, to the point of Hollywood just talking about it now in thrillers, that the CIA is involved in this coup here, that drug deal there, this drug ring here, because we keep all of these things up because they behoove us to get information and arms and different things around the world. And it's like, you're not spying on the bad guys, you're puppeteering the bad guys.
Or sometimes you are the bad guys.
Well, if you're puppeteering the bad guys.
But, well, there's there's whistleblowers and evidence that have come out that, like, CIA officers and assets, do engage in terrible stuff with children. And this is something that Martyr Made covered a few years ago when he did his giant Epstein deep dive, which is great to listen to, because he gets into all the weeds of all the different directions this goes, and it's way too much for us to talk about on here. but like they commit these acts that for anybody else would be like, okay, you're going to prison for a long time, and like a normal person would want to shoot you in the face, but they just get to like keep their jobs. That's just what they do, and they get away with it. And yeah, there's no doubt, because there's been so many instances of, well, like there was the Finders Cult. I think it was like in the 90s, and they were connected both to the Navy, the CIA, and Chinese intelligence, and they were holding children in a warehouse in DC for who knows how long, and some random cop uncovered all this, and then it all disappeared very quickly. But you can look it up, and that's one of the ones that the left hasn't debunked, because not a ton of people know about it, but
Right.
it's it's a real thing. Or like Ghislaine Maxwell, her father worked for both British and Israeli intelligence, I'm pretty sure. Like, he's deep in the intelligence communities on a global scale. And okay, his daughter, he dies mysteriously, but his daughter works with this guy who's trafficking people all across the globe and connected with a bunch of powerful people. It's like, okay, this isn't just a conspiracy theory anymore. Well, I mean, it is, because we can only theorize, because they won't give us the actual evidence. But this isn't a conspiracy theory in the colloquial sense of, oh, you're just deranged, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, no, okay, these are real people, real documents, real evidence, doing really bad things with other really powerful people. But they, the left just likes to cover it up, because there's this article from Politico. After the discourse really changed after these documents came out, because before they were like, oh, all these stupid MAGA people are going to be so embarrassed because it's going to say that Trump did these things. And then as soon as the documents came out, like next day, pretty much the entire left-wing discourse is like, why is MAGA so obsessed with child trafficking? And it's like, okay, you people, but we'll link this article from Politico. Well, I don't know if I should say these because we're on YouTube, but the thing with pizza,
the thing that has to do with a fence and an Italian food that Americans have co-opted,
and then the letter of the alphabet that's famous in the
most conspiratorial letter.
Yeah. So that thing, and the Epstein list. Why the far right is obsessed with. Don't want to say that on YouTube either. We'll link it in the email. Sign up. But it's just good to read through and laugh at, because there's this conspiracy theory expert, Mike Rothschild, who has no relation to the Rothschilds that are allegedly no relation. But he's just like, psychologizing it, and being like, oh, these people, they're just like reading into all this too much, and they have this way of thinking that causes them to see the world a certain way. It's like, okay, like 15 years ago, you would have denied that Epstein was involved with any of this stuff. But now that it's out, they just keep moving the goalpost back. And it's like, okay, well, this happened, but these MAGA people, they're all crazy and they read too much into things. Or it's like, no, okay, this is real. There's real things going on. The thing with pizza is probably real too. At first I was like, oh yeah, that's a conspiracy theory. But then once I actually learned about it, it's like, oh, okay, there's way too much here for this to be coincidental. So I
was on board with that one from the beginning.
Yeah.
By the way, just to be clear, I was there.
Yeah.
I was there.
I wasn't so sure, but then I listened to the Martyr Maid thing, and I was like, holy crap.
Well, and that's the reality is, the farther you dive into this, then you start to listen to RFK Jr. talk about his uncle and all of the JFK stuff. And it becomes very plausible and very interesting, because it switches from this Hollywood view where, intelligence officers and law enforcement have to go deep undercover into really nasty circumstances in order to bust it up and get rid of the bad guys. And you got to play a part for a little while. You start to get this picture that that's not actually how it is. Maybe some of these things start that way, but then all of a sudden, what it comes down to is U.S. intelligence is actually propping up, picking winners and losers amongst the scumbags of the world in order to not find information and take them down, but in order to basically run the underworld. I mean, it's kind of what it starts to look like after a while.
Yeah.
We got to run the underworld, because then we have our thumb on everything that's really powerful behind the scenes, and all these other things out here. We can just, then put pressure on the people who are in front of the curtain, who are actually out there, i.e. blackmail books being, and again, not book, you know what I mean? Yeah. Blackmail treasure troves like Epstein has become incredibly valuable information. So did you just acquire it, or are you the one building it? You start to get this picture that's very icky, for lack of a better word. And you realize that this is pretty nasty stuff. But I mean, this is like Hollywood thriller come true. There really are bad actors
Well,
at
even
this level.
worse. I mean, you couldn't make this. You couldn't tell the truth about this in Hollywood as a fictional story. You know, like I mean, there's like Eyes Wide Shut is like a tame representation of the cultic and evil aspects of the underworld. It's like Alex Jones says, the truth is stranger than fiction. And I'm not believing this just to be like a provocateur. It's like, because from all the evidence I've seen, it's like, okay, do you like people like this Politico author and this expert, Catherine Kim and Mike Rothschild, like, okay, do you guys sincerely think that like our intelligence communities just have like goodness in their hearts and are just these super kind-hearted people that are
thanks to the Hollywood propaganda divisions, everyone does.
Yeah, well, that like no cult has ever existed ever, and no powerful person has ever been part of a cult, and that people don't, that like they'll say Christians hold crazy religious views, but then deny that anybody else can possibly hold crazy religious views, that deny that anybody powerful has ever been in a cult. And it's just insane. It's insane. It's literally the blue pill. It's
interesting.
How can people take the blue pill?
Well, and this is where it's this is where I think go ahead.
Well, because it's easier. I wish I could trust the system as much as these people do. I think life would be easier if I was just like, yeah, our government has the best for us, and you know what, women's rights, that's abortion okay, and you know what, trans rights is just people trying to feel good. Like I envy the blue pilled people who can just like go through the world and they're like, wow, everything's progressing, everything is getting better. But it's like you look at the world honestly, and that's just not how it works.
Mm-hmm. And I see, by the way, the trolls are starting. Well, I say the trolls, I should be careful. I'm not going to be too derogatory against anyone who hasn't commented too much, but we got some interesting stuff coming into YouTube now. So head on over if you want a conversation the last few minutes there. That could get fun. But we'll go ahead and remind you, first of all, before I jump into this one last thing I wanted to say, let me go ahead and remind you, go to philschlafly.com, sign up for the email list. There are going to be, as you can tell, a lot of links today, including things we didn't even get to that are just interesting you should look at around the topics we talked about. But also, go like, share, and subscribe wherever you are. YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble. Hey, X rolled off really fast there. I didn't go for Twitter. You're welcome. You're welcome.
He's fixed.
I'm fixed. I'm getting younger, folks. I'm getting younger. But let this be your clarion call for go to Rumble. Watch us there. And, Rumble or whatever else takes the place. This isn't just because of Rumble. This is because YouTube stinks and we can't say things on YouTube. So go to Rumble. We may end up having to have 2 different live broadcasts because there's a bunch of stuff we want to talk about that YouTube won't let us do. So you want to see it, go to X and follow us, go to Rumble and follow us. The links are in the description. And your new favorite streamers. Here we go. All right, here come the Crusaders. He's getting on the chats now. But go on over, take part in those, and then let me leave with this. Here, I think, if I can say this, I think that I'm not saying that my level. I've said since the beginning of Vivek Ramaswamy getting into the race, like, yeah, I'm really glad that he's there. He's a cool voice. He's saying things that I think need to be said and that people want to hear, and he understands what the moment is. I don't know if I fully trust the credentials of his conservatism to like it when the rubber meets the road and stuff gets hard and you have to get under the test, or you have to be put to the test. I don't know if I could vouch for the fact that I would trust he would make the right conservative policy decisions. I'm not sure how deep the understanding is there, but he understands the moment. And as far as things that he's saying, awesome. Absolutely awesome. I'm glad he's been on the debate stage. It's the only thing that's made them worthwhile. And it has definitely been very revealing for some of the other folks, I think, to have him there making those points since Trump wasn't there to do it.
Right.
That being said, though, I actually think that throughout the course of what he's been running a year now or something like that, since he picked up over a year ago, I think that he has become more sincere. And I think that he actually has really changed or solidified his mind on a lot of things. And to me, this isn't like a commercial for Vivek. This is a commercial for what we should be like, ever pursuing the truth and not just being closed-minded to, I already think what I think, but to moving forward with what we think the truth is and following that path and then being open-minded to that. And let me find, because in his own words, I'm not sure if I can find it here. Where did it go? Here. Because, for instance, on the J6 stuff, whereas Ron DeSantis has started making some comments that just kind of sweep J6 under the rug, which
Mm-hmm.
the picture that has been painted over the last 3 years is extremely different than what the left says, and is honestly extremely different than what you and I first
Mm-hmm.
saw. Like, so much has now become available that paints a picture. If you're not willing to look at all of the things that become available and then continue to make your conclusion off of that, if you just decided and you're stuck, that's a problem. And that was one of the things that I saw on his around the time here. I saw Vivek commented or he posted on X on January 6th, Happy Entrapment Day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a far cry from the original Vivek Ramaswamy, who talked about tears in his eyes when he was watching television that day and how, it was disgraceful what unfolded. But Tuesday, he actually did a piece with the Federalist or did an interview. And he actually said that even though he was doing this anti-woke crusade, he was a business executive back then, 2020, hindsight being 2020, haha, double meaning, haha. But he actually said 3 years ago, if you would have asked me if January 6th was the product of government entrapment, I would have told you that was crazy conspiracy stuff. I was a biotech CEO consuming the news from mainstream media outlets. I would have told you that was fringe talk, except it's not. And he then proceeded to tell her, having dug into this issue, seeing all of the things that have come up since then, the new video footage that's come out, Capitol police officers letting people walk right in, although one side was violent, the other side wasn't, all the stuff that wasn't available. This gives us a responsibility to speak the truth when you then realize, wait a minute, there's a whole lot more to this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start following that path. I appreciate, and again, I look at this and I'm like, this is actually pretty sincere. Like, this isn't picking, he really is saying, yeah, I was that and I changed my mind because more stuff came out.
Right.
I considered it.
And he doesn't
and
just
I decided
ignore it like a
this was the truth. Yeah. And I think that's admirable. And I actually find it pretty genuine. I think that he's telling the truth. And that to me is, I think, the key difference that I keep noting between old school conservatives and the new school conservatives. And I hear it talked about the, boomers versus zoomers and this and that. Like, everyone's making these interesting comparisons about the big division in the conservative movement, America first or establishment first.
Right.
So that's kind of, I don't mean to say that because I know a lot of people who won't go to the MAGA movement, but they're not establishment first. It's the values are there. It's a very interesting conversation about what have we paid attention to and how does it inform our decisions. And I think that pursuing the truth, having that be our only bias, and then being willing to talk and entertain about all the things that come up is incredibly important. Because when you just close off to it, either because I don't think that's real, so I'm just going to stop listening, or no, that's harmful, and you actively, it turns into a whole world of problems. And it really does put you at a point where now, like, you have people, like I described at the beginning, I'm looking at some of these guys going, how do you not see this? Like with the Epstein thing.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are connected to him that shouldn't have been. Yes, Bill Clinton was obviously part of that. Yeah, Trump appeared on flight logs and this and that and the other. But that's not, like, what I'm looking at and is blowing my mind and worrying me is the fact that, is it possible to say that the CIA was running Jeffrey Epstein or something like that, or just intelligence? Did they set him up and create this human trafficking ring to gain blackmail on the world? I don't care who was on the flight logs. Almost, this is kind of the bigger thing to think about, because this is these are the people who are accountable to the people who I elect. Holy stinking cow!
Yeah.
So when you are open to all of the possibilities and consider it, your list of priorities kind of shifts and moves. And when you just close it off because it's too much, or you don't want to deal with it, or you don't believe it, it really leaves you in a place where it's like you're talking about losing the checkers game over here, but we're all adults now playing chess. Like it really is like, this is a different conversation. We need you to come over and I want your opinion on these things, but everyone's just closed off. That I hope that is, that kind of forward motion from Vivek. I would love to see all of us, which is what this program is about. Let's talk about stuff. Like, I'm coming into all of these things with an open mind.
Yeah.
Be
honest about the issues and not hide from things.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. Be willing to change your mind and be willing to look at all the information. And sometimes you're going to dismiss stuff as crazy because it's nuts. And other times you're going to go, wait a minute, that's actually got a paper trail that's very interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes you think something's crazy, but eventually you realize it's not. Like me with the pizza thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So
I think that we've held everybody for a while. I think this is our record.
This is a record.
Longest.
Now I know we had tech problems at the beginning, but there is some very interesting stuff. Police allowed. Yeah, here we go. Police allowing people to enter after the break-in. It's still it's not as simple. That's painting it very oversimplistically when you go back and look at the timeline of everything. There are two, and both two sides of the Capitol are two very different stories, even continuing at the same time. It's wild to make a singular statement when you see a lot of the stuff that's out there. So critical thinking is lacking here. Go look at some more. Come on back. We'll maybe do a whole episode on this and we can get into it. But there's a lot more to it than even that. But that's farther than a lot of other people. I see someone on YouTube here talking about this. That's farther than a lot of other people I know have even looked into it. They just listen to what's on the news and move on and decide, which is unhealthy and uneducated. Don't do that. Don't be that. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us this week.
Thanks for being here. Unauthorized Caucus, Thursdays at noon, and apparently now stretching into the 1 o'clock Central Hour.
Yep.
We'll go for a marathon episode Sunday and see what we can do. Drum up all the online support and hate we can. Go follow us. Sign up for the emails, phyllisschlafly.com. Thanks for being here, talking about DJT, RDS, and the infamous Jeffrey Epstein files that are coming out. We wish you all a happy Caucus Day on Monday, and we will come back and circle up next week for another Unauthorized Caucus.